Thank you, Thomas. Great to be back to school. I have a very short presentation, but I would like to start by, like Jean-Patrick, asking you a question. Do you recognize people on this picture? Or do you recognize something on this picture? It's a bit, is it too small? There are flags, that's a clue. Don't see, so there is this Californian flag, European flag, Danish flag. You probably don't recognize people on that picture. There's one of my friends. He's still in the company, but it was a close call. That's a meeting between Ørsted, Danish energy developer, and the Californian governor a few months ago. It was the 24th of July, if I remember well. And a few hours after that, the company learned that they lost, one of them, their flagship project was 4 billion, if I remember well, was cancelled by President Trump. It was an offshore wind project that was almost completed. So it was a big surprise. Of course, it was anticipated that adverse policy regarding wind, and especially offshore wind in the US, was anticipated, but not such a big blow. And it resulted into a 19% drop of the total value of the company. So I've chosen this example, and of course I could have found hundreds of examples regarding the links between geopolitics and energy. Since you're part of a seminar looking at this dimension, you won't be surprised that, to see energy part of this conversation. But things are moving, and moving fast in that world. That's my only slide, don't worry. And I would like to have enough space to exchange and answer your questions. But basically, you know, when you think about geopolitics, I think most of you will think about energy and oil, gas. That's because energy answers to the laws of physics. Its resources are unequally distributed, of course. In my industry, electricity, you cannot store easily. It's very hard to store electricity, at least it is costly. It is true also that you need to balance every second the supply and demand. So it means that it's attached to physics, maybe contrary to the monetary world we just explored with Jean-Patrick earlier. That means that, interestingly, so to say, politics and energy are intertwined. What is changing is, in a way, but what is making things a bit more complicated, but not fundamentally changing things, it's the green technologies and the energy transition, because you need new resources, rare earth, for example, it's often cited. But something happened in the recent years, and this has more to do with politics than energy, actually. So I've picked a few examples, and I'm sure you can find other. There is the weaponization of energy in Europe by Russia. I can tell you that for companies like mine and other, I wouldn't say it was a big surprise, but one of the value proposition of Gazprom, the Russian company selling gas to Europe, was that they were a very, very reliable partner selling gas despite ups and downs into the relations, the EU-Russia relation, for example. So when Russia started to cut off or reduce the supply to Europe, increasing prices, creating a lot of tensions, including inside Europe, it was a surprise, and it was a clear weaponization of energy because it followed the Russian aggression on Ukraine. The United States recently, I've just mentioned what happened in Ørsted, but when you look at almost, I wouldn't say all the major foreign policy decision or announcement by President Trump, but if you look at Greenland, if you look at Panama, if you look at Canada as well, energy or at least the control over the resources are at the center of this policy. It is true as well for Ukraine. When President Trump started to look at the issue, you may remember there's been an agreement on the access to Ukrainian resources. It is true also that in our relations between the EU and the US that we have, the energy is at the core of these negotiations. So my point here is that you can mention also, of course, China, the recent restrictions on rare earths. That's also an easy example. So when you work for an energy company, there is no option but to deal with geopolitics and energy. But what can you do about that? So that's the key issue, the key point. And basically, in our industry, we synthesize our problem by a trilemma, is this triangle. It's quite easy to understand. You need to secure 3 dimensions when you talk about energy. This is true for the state, of course, but it is in a way true for the companies. I'll explain that. First of all, energy security. If you want to have lights, in winter to have heating and cooling system, you need energy, you need to secure your supply, and as I said, it depends. You can have shale gas under your feet, cheap resources, but it's not the case for every country, of course, and it doesn't mean that you will secure the 2 other part of the triangle, affordability, or I think it's called there energy equity, because basically it's competitiveness for the companies, but it's also a matter of purchasing power for the citizens, for the voters, and the third one is the sustainability part of the trilemma. When, of course, this is it's this job for the politicians to strike the right balance between the 3. But when you work for a company, first of all, some of your customers are the state. We at EDF, we produce clean electricity via renewables, hydropower, wind, solar, and nuclear. And for example, for hydro dams or nuclear power plants, of course, the decision is in the hands of the state. So you need to put your value proposition at the right place in this triangle to explain to your customers that this hydro dam, for instance, will not only increase the energy security because you will secure. We have just built a new dam, for example, in Cameroon, increasing by roughly 30%, the energy generation capacities in the country. So it's clearly, ticking the box upstairs. It's a clean energy if you manage the ENS aspects, and we of course we pretend to do that at EDF. And you need to demonstrate that it's going to be affordable for an emerging economy. So you cannot do without this trilemma. And what is happening is that the energy security, the security part of this, is in a way, we've talked about a backlash, is emerging again. It's more and more important today. Just 5 years ago, basically, before the war in Ukraine, most of the people forget about that. If you look at Germany, for instance, I think one of the major shifts in the German recent policy shifts, you can mention, of course, the dependencies towards China, the lack of attention towards strategic or defense issues, but there was also energy and the energy dependence vis-à-vis Russia. And that's where states are adapting to this new reality. They can try to regain control of assets. You've seen a lot of nationalization of assets in the world. I mean, you have several tools to do that. Organization also, and companies are more and more organizing themselves to regain control, or at least to get some grip on that dimension of their business. And I know it's at the heart of what the ESSEC team is trying to build here, to strengthen the capabilities of companies to deal with this dimension. And of course, for the state, there is a necessity to give more attention to the upper side of these triangles, to the energy security, and try to balance these two. One of our fear at EDF is that we may lose some attention. It's the backlash that we talked earlier on the sustainability aspect, because it's part of the security. It's part of the survival of the human species, of course, but it's part of the security. And what we try to do, at least as a company, but I'm happy to be challenged on that aspect, we strongly believe that we can offer energy solutions that secure all these aspects, energy supply and sustainability and affordability. So that's the new world we are living in, energy companies, and I think it wouldn't be very different for other oil and gas or whatever their business model are. They are living in that world with this trilemma, and they need to cope with that and face this hurdle. Happy to answer your questions now.